So, this is your briefing for Saturday, March 28th, and the severe threat today is real. So, starting out, we have our categorical, and it is a really moderate one. So, it's something that we don't see that often at this time of year, but when it does, it's going to mean it's really exciting because, all this energy in our atmosphere is going to be perfect for an outbreak. So, these moderates generally are pointing towards a potential outbreak happening. And the enhanced means there's probably going to be a tornado in there. So really we've had a lot of tornadoes in the slight area. So keep that in mind as you look at this. We've had a lot going on. So especially with this, we could see tornadoes anywhere within the slight. So just showing an example of this, it's such a big area, we could see tornadoes probably from anywhere down in Arkansas all the way up into Wisconsin and Iowa. So the more kind of that avocado shape is showing that storm development will occur on the west and it'll be traveling to the northeast. So we can see that obviously there as we see kind of a point at the end on the west, and then it gets kind of bigger the further east you get. So really our target range today is going to be anywhere from eastern Iowa, northeastern Missouri, and the very northwestern part of Indiana, and basically Illinois. Illinois is our target for today because looking at it, it's a moderate threat. We have the enhanced covering most of the central northern part of the state, but really that Peoria, Illinois area is smack dab in the middle. So they did extend from yesterday that enhanced area further towards Chicago. It's actually covering Chicago now. So expect anywhere in there to contain severe thunderstorms and that tornado threat. They are expecting a few strong tornadoes today. It's not a perhaps, there is going to be a few strong tornadoes. And then they'll have tornadoes anywhere else in there. Expect tornado warnings anywhere from Kentucky and through the Midwest. I'm assuming there is a higher chance anywhere if you're along the Ohio River, just because that is kind of the core of our area. We really get in parts that we haven't seen severe weather yet this year in, and we start to see with this rain and all of the winds, we see that humidity, we see that temperature that we looked at in the forecast this morning, and we really see all of that combine, and with that energy that we're looking at here, and we'll look at that here in a bit, where all of this is going, it's going to be crazy to see, how much development there is. We're also going to look at a few loops of composite models from the HRRR just to kind of show you a general idea of what storms will look like, and we won't be talking about the supercell composition because we talked about that in our forecast, but it's going to be a very interesting setup today because every cell we see in this composite will be a supercell. So it's going to be it's a super high powered environment. The cap is going to be broken today, so you can expect the full ordeal. So we're going to look at each of the other SPC predictions and see really, what's going on with this. So we have our wind, and this is something that can give you a pretty good idea of where the storms are going to be at, that we could see the severe thunderstorm warnings and potentially tornado warnings with. So it kind of covers the same area as what the slight does because we agree on all of this that it's going to be about the same area, same storms. And that's something that we're going to have to watch throughout the day is you may not have a tornado, but if we have a severe thunderstorm warning, we almost need to take that today in this very unstable environment as a tornado warning. So if you see that and you may be wondering why, it's because wind gusts today are going to be topping out at like 80 mile per hour. So that's enough, and especially at straight line winds, can knock down trees, power lines, some structures that aren't stable, and it can cause a whole lot of damage. So we could see a lot of those, and especially with these supercells that we are predicting so far, we could see a lot of downbursts. So we could see, that wind kind of gets sucked up into the storm, and all of a sudden we see a downburst where all of the wind from the storm that climbed all the way up to the top makes a sudden kind of dispersal at the ground level. So that can cause a lot of damage too, and that can be almost as strong as tornadic winds. So we could see storms where we could have some quick spin-ups, we could see long track tornadoes with some supercells, and we can see such strong winds just coming out of the storm that they all can cause about the same amount of damage. So basically, if you see a storm coming, just have a plan in place and be prepared. The hail threat is looking just about the same as our severe threat. So generally when you see hail, that's a strong storm. So whenever we see hail, especially at this, where we're seeing that 30% and significant percentage of the chance of hail, we're seeing a lot of widespread hail, very large to extremely large hailstones. So not only can those cause damage, but we can see with these very hail-inducing storms, those are going to be the ones that will be producing tornadoes, and these tornadoes are going to be the ones that are the most severe of the day. So once again, that is kind of generally centered over Illinois into Iowa, Missouri, and Indiana. So if you live right around there, but mainly in Illinois, be prepared today because you are going to be hit hard. Even if you don't get a tornado, you're going to have wind, hail, and everything else. So just prepare like it is going to be a tornado today because it's such an unstable environment, we could pretty much see anything. And across everywhere else where we see that 15%, we're going to see a storm. Every 1 in 10 storms is going to be generally one that is going to have hail. So considering we're having a lot of these individual supercells and other storms producing throughout the day, expect a lot of hail with some of these. So if you have stuff outside, you might want to bring it in or protect it at least, because a lot of these hailstones, even if you live in an area where hailstones don't they aren't that large, with these storms they're traveling across multiple states, so you can expect with that we could see that hail threat being brought from state to state throughout the day. So looking at the tornado threat, it is one that we haven't seen yet this year, but is kind of an interesting one. So this is the most recent one from this morning. Now note throughout the course of this year so far, we've had tornadoes anywhere within the 2% to 5%, more in the 5% area. So those of you who are in the 5% area, just prepare for that because there is a chance that you could get a storm or two, especially if you're getting a storm that is traveling from anywhere near Illinois or Missouri. It's going to have a little bit of that extra energy working with it. So something that is quite interesting in my opinion is we're going to look at, there is a 15% chance there, which generally means a lot more than that. So if we're seeing a 15% probability legend there, you see how it says 15, you may wonder why isn't it 30, 45, or 60. Well, that's because, it's within like a 50-mile range. So they can't predict exactly where it's at, but they can put a significant, which is the hashed over whatever they think is going to have the highest chance of tornadoes. And that's what you're going to take as that 100% within that area there are going to be tornadoes. And today it just so happens to be there will be many tornadoes as we're predicting an outbreak. So if you live pretty much in that 10% area, expect tornadoes if you're east of Iowa. They are predicting everywhere from central to northern Illinois, even into Indiana, where you can see tornadoes. So expect those storms, if they have long track ones, to travel further east, up into Michigan and Indiana, and even into parts of Ohio. You can expect some of that. But we do have that threat further south, too, that we could see some storms in southern Illinois that will track across. But our highest chance of tornadoes, we're going to call that there are going to be tornadoes in central and northern Illinois today. So if you live there, be prepared for that. The Day 1 convective outlook from Norman is showing that there is a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms from eastern Iowa into central and northern Illinois. A significant weather outbreak is expected for portions of the Midwest this afternoon and evening. Threats include tornadoes, a few which may be significant, large to very large hail, and severe wind gusts. So they are predicting, Iowa and the Illinois, where Iowa is going to be kind of that convection ground. It's going to be building in there and traveling into Illinois. Then we'll see those storms track east. What we can also see some convection building big storms due to daytime heating across much of Indiana, even into Ohio. So expect if you live anywhere in the Midwest that a storm could pop up that is going to be severe at any time. But looking at that, they're saying in the afternoon and evening. Really, we're looking at the time frame from 3 to 10 p.m. The National Weather Service in Lincoln, Illinois, was talking about that they believe that their most severe time will be from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. So expect pretty much any time the entire afternoon. And we'll look here in a second where the current composite reflectivity models are showing to see what all we're expecting. Okay, so starting out, we are looking at the most unstable CAPE, so the mu CAPE. So we started out at noon, 12 p.m. Eastern time. So we can see, it's 11. We're going to start to kind of use a conversion there. We're just going to call it Eastern time, and I will give you the Central time also. So at 1 p.m., so noon Central Time, we are seeing, some of that red start to build in. We also see some down in Texas, but that's capped with that cold front, so don't expect anything down south. But where the focus right now is Illinois. We see these storms build, and they're starting out with the numbers in the 2000s. So we are seeing, with the most unstable Cape, the big storms are going to be developing right around 1 p.m. is when we're going to start seeing this energy be dispersed and used. So then looking at 2 p.m., we're seeing kind of what we're talking about, the 3500s into the 4000s across central Illinois. And that is going to be where our super severe weather is going to be popping out of into Indiana. That's why we have the Indiana threat too. We look continuing on the 3 o'clock, and we start to see right there, right at 3 o'clock, we have a super big punch where we see that one split into Illinois, from Illinois into Indiana, and then we see all that energy start to build in from Missouri coming up into Illinois. So that is our central threat. That's the further south threat. Then we start to see some of that break off and go into Ohio, where the severe thunderstorms are going to be coming out of Indiana and traveling to the northeast, so you can expect some of those. Then we can look on to the 4 p.m. and we see it get really severe. Now you can note too, there are some little holes in the kind of that red there that drop back down to 500. Now note, that is probably going to be where we're going to see some of these massive storms. They're going to be using up a lot of the energy. So in those, expect severe thunderstorms. And we can see all the way from 5 into 6 p.m., we can see a lot of that energy is kind of being dispersed. Well, that's where our huge storms are going to be. So according to the most unstable Cape, our most severe time will be really from 4 p.m. to 5, even into 6, 7, and then 8 p.m. is where we start to see that die off of a lot of the energy, where it's focused into the kind of the northern part of Illinois. So you can expect that basically the entire dinner hour, at the dinner hours after 3, we will find all of this severe weather in the Illinois area, and that's what we're going to be focusing on here. So now I want to focus on the composite reflectivity, because this is going to be what is the real game changer when it comes to seeing where storms are at. So this is the HRRR model. This is my first time using it, and I am extremely impressed with the composite mode on it. So looking at this, we can see basically where these lines of thunderstorms are going to be at, and where we can see, some severe compared to other stuff. So we keep in mind our energy and where that all is at. So looking at 1 p.m., we see some pop-up thunderstorms, and note too, there's a lot of daytime heating. So focusing on this, there is a squall line that kind of forms across Texas, but once again, we're going to focus specifically on Illinois and parts of the Midwest. So we see a few pop-ups start to occur across Missouri. You can see some of those peaks with those red dots. Now keep an eye on those as we continue, but you can also note too, there is one with a little bit of curl across central Missouri. So keep in mind that those could be rotating. Across Ohio, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 potential supercells that could be producing. So we're going to count supercells as those separate little red dots that are occurring in this high energy zone. So we could see them across Indiana, and then looking at central Illinois, we can kind of see where they're tracking. You can kind of see that streak of them. But we can track from there where these are going to go. So looking at the 2 o'clock, we see these storms developing, kind of grouping together, but they're still gaining energy and getting severe. Continuing on the 3, they're getting bigger. Now we see the ones from Ohio move into Pennsylvania, but we do see some new ones start to develop near Cincinnati. And then into Illinois, we see the ones right in the center of the state. We can see some near Lincoln developing too, and those ones are traveling northeast. But we start to gain some energy, and take a note at the south part of Missouri, we see a line of thunderstorms that start to break up, but note they keep developing. We see some of them in central Missouri breaking towards the north. At 4 p.m., we see that line really start to punch through the Ohio Valley, and we see it through the north part of Indianapolis. It's going to stay south of Fort Wayne at 4 p.m. And then in Illinois, we're seeing right there in that central part, we are seeing some some of that purple, which is indicating some of that 60, so the huge amounts of rainfall at once. So we can expect a lot of that. But note too, this is all training, so the energy coming from Texas is just one after another, pumping more and more energy into Illinois. And note too, this is a spinning low. You can kind of see it there over Nebraska. So we can expect that a lot of this is going to be actually producing storms. Especially that spin is going to allow some storms to be produced. At 5 p.m., even more severe weather starts to occur. We see the push off of the stuff in Pennsylvania and some new gathering in the south part of Ohio of some supercells. And then in Indiana, that's where we're going to see our clumps of severe storms. But Illinois is just absolutely, there's some curvature in some of those storms, as we can see, especially right now. If it's predicted curvature, you can expect that a lot's going to happen out of it. So then we start to see at 6 p.m., some of that start to work off to the east. So we start to see that push, and that's where our eastern Illinois threat is at 6 p.m. At 7 p.m., we see it push into the northwest corner of Indiana, and that is kind of as a clump of storms. We're still going to have some supercells in there, but we can kind of see it all clumping together as one big severe mass. Then at 8 p.m., we see it all push all the way into Indiana. But look back at Illinois. There is still some supercells popping up in the center. So this is not just a one and done thing. This is one after another being just kind of created and traveling. They're traveling more northeast after 6 p.m. Then at 9, we see the storms really push into Michigan. We see some across central Ohio, and we see some across central Illinois. We see them keep kind of pumping out more and more supercells. And we see at 10, them finally start to make their way out of Illinois. The focus kind of shifts to central Indiana into parts of Michigan. At 11, we see it into Indiana again, and it's still in Ohio. And one or two lagging supercells potentially over parts of Illinois. And then finally at 12, we see the low get down there, and we could see, especially at 12 a.m., we see that low really dig deep and start to lift these storms. So that's when we start to see kind of that relief start to file in. I want to also now look at our SIG tour, and this will be the conclusion of our loops here, and then we'll finish out the show. But this quick little briefing thing was really a good thing to try to do today, because with this severe storm threat, you really need to know ahead of time what to expect, and especially with today's severe threat across Illinois and stuff, it's a weird time of year, so it's good that we're getting this information out there, and so much of the community is able to push this information out there so you all can get the good information from many different sources. So looking at SIG tour at 1 p.m. So the SIG tour is a significant tornado parameter at the fixed layer. So this is where the highest chance of tornadoes are going to occur in the storms. So as we see storms, we can really see, okay, this area of the storm is going to have the highest chance of a tornado. So we're only going to focus on the Midwest with this, because this energy is moving kind of through a weird area, and it's going to keep pushing. So we see it really in Missouri here in the central part. We see a very small 2 right there. We see some in Arkansas too, but that's kind of capped right there, but it's going to get pushed in the area where that cap is broken. So we'll be able to see some severe storms work their way as soon as we see it enter into Illinois. So then at 2 p.m., we see that kind of burst of energy across parts of Arkansas, but really an explosion of the SIG tour across parts of Missouri. So that is why that extends into Missouri, is because of the high chance there. And at 3 p.m., we see it enter Iowa, but note there is that training line of SIG tour, of the higher SIG tour reading across Arkansas, that will push into Illinois. So you can expect it across the western part of Illinois. Right at 3 p.m., you can expect it right along that portion of Iowa. If you live anywhere along the border of Illinois on either side of the state lines, expect the most severe storms then. That is your highest chance of tornadoes if you live right there. Then 4 p.m., we see that second explosion really. We see it across some individual cells that kind of gain this energy across the very central line. If you would cut Illinois in half, you could really see it on the that kind of top half is where we see some individual supercells that will be producing tornadoes in there. Then we see on the state line at 4 p.m. from central Iowa to central Missouri. We see all the way down that state line. We see these extreme numbers at 3.5 to 4. So expect that 4, and then we could even look at whenever we're looking at the 5 o'clock time. It is another one that is kind of a doozy. We see it work its way into Illinois. We see that official transition to a 5, and we see it start to work its way east into Illinois. We see all these individual cells kind of doing their own thing, but the big mass of storms is going to focus in the eastern Iowa at this time at 5 p.m. Eastern time, so 4 p.m. Central time. We will see all of these work their way into Illinois. Then at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Central, we see that cell to the south central part of Illinois gain some energy. We also see that kind of line of thunderstorms that will have a spin in them occurring across the Iowa-Illinois border, but expect central and then that kind of Indiana border also is where we're going to have the most spin in these storms at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Central. At 7 p.m., so 6 p.m. Central Time, we're going to have storms. We're going to see that big split. We're going to see an Indiana split that's working its way through Cincinnati. We see one working towards Indianapolis with that high tornado threat. We see it in many places across Illinois. 8 p.m., we see that one work its way into Ohio. We see a Kentucky threat. We see an Indiana threat. And then we see the kind of conclusion of the major threat of that line of supercells through Illinois. 9 p.m. Eastern Time, we see that die-off of energy in Illinois. We start focusing on the parts of Ohio on the west. We see Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus. We see Indianapolis. We see south of Fort Wayne. And we see parts west of Lexington. But it is going to be kind of Nashville and north of that. Then at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, we see that really line of thunderstorms with that bow echo. You can already tell it's going to be there. That super line of severe thunderstorms to be producing all the way from Tennessee up through Indiana. And we see that energy work its way through Ohio also. We see a Fort Wayne threat at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And then going to 11, we see that energy start to die off, but we can also see some more energy gaining in Indianapolis as it looks like a supercell is developing. Then we see it in kind of Evansville, Indiana, and parts of Kentucky. We see. So you'll have to stay tuned in there because after 10 p.m. really into 11 p.m. midnight, so really those overnight hours, we see this system work its way into the Ohio Valley, and we see it shift through Indiana as big supercells will produce across central Indiana and work its way through in the overnight hours. So we didn't really look that far out because the HRRR doesn't have that many model runs, but looking at it overall, we will see any systems that are left over will be pushing through Ohio and up through. So it's going to be a severe night across Indiana and Ohio. But really, once again, before, really it looks like the central part of Illinois, your threat dies off before 10 p.m. So looking at state by state, we see the threat move its way out of Missouri really by the early evening hours. We see it move out of there by looking about 6 p.m. Then at Illinois, we'll see the Iowa move out about the same time because it is traveling northeast. So we see Illinois start to kind of lose, that central part of Illinois, lose its energy at really 8 p.m. So really at dark, whenever it gets dark, we see at, kind of that 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, we see it work its way into Indiana, and then it loses its energy at 10 p.m. in central Indiana. But we could see one or two supercells pop up, and then as we see in the eastern Indiana, we start to see it move out closer to midnight. And then looking at the overall aspect of severity, we are looking at that kind of moving out of Ohio around 3 a.m. So if you live anywhere there, and it also looking at Michigan, we can also see that storm system moving out anywhere between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., but the energy is losing the entire time. So that we're really looking at, once we pass midnight, the storms are going to start dying off, but they will still be severe up until then. So you have to prepare for that. So just looking over the categorical again, look at where you're at, look at where you live on the map, see where you're at, and listen to everything we were just talking about, and look and see and compare, am I in this area, and prepare for what could occur in the afternoon and the nighttime hours tonight. And in conclusion, here is your tornado threat again to see where you're at on the map for the categorical, but also to show you again where the highest tornado threat is. Stay safe, everybody, and we hope to see you again on Monday for the forecast for Monday. And we will look at forecasts for every single day next week. And yeah, so stay safe and have a good rest of your weekend.